Next up, we have Adrie from Brazil.
Imagine waking up in the middle of the night with the wind blowing out at your window. It's another cyclone that has arrived. Your clothes are wet, you pick up your brothers and run. Your house is underwater. You don't know your native language because it was taken from you before you were born. Your ancestors were kidnapped and raped. They trying to whiten the population by raping and killing your people. Now your name is Italian, German, Portuguese, Spanish. They took everything from you. At 6 years old, men will already try to exploit your body. You grow up with your own lands under attack and exploitation. They want everything, you, your family, your territory, your life. Lost your home is normal in this system. Running out of food, seeing your brothers and sisters with stomach pain from hunger. It's the system. This is not just my story. It is a story of many indigenous and Brazilians who continue to be marginalized and silenced. Tell their stories. Remember their names. We are not just numbers. We have been killed from years. We have been suffering by this system and by this climate crisis from years. One more thing. I ask you to look at Brazil. Our president, Jair Bolsonaro, is not here because he doesn't have the capacity to handle all of his lies. Because he's lying all the time. He's lying about Brazilian people. He's lying about our good preservation of our forest. Liar, liar, our forests are on fire. We are in an emergency. Our country is collapsing, paying debts from the global north and suffering for the government's genocidal policies. Global north, global leaders, Bolsonaro, we will not let you destroy us. The fight continues to the last drop of blood. Nadie es ilegal en tierra robada. Ninguém é ilegal em terra roubada. No one is illegal on stolen land.
I'll just repeat the end of that one. No one is illegal on stolen land. Our land defenders are crucial to this fight. Next up is Evelyn from Uganda. Woo!
Hello. Hi everyone. I hope you're all fine. I know it's really cold, but thank you all for joining us. My name is Evelyn Acham. I'm a climate activist from Uganda. Uganda is located in Africa, and Africa is one of the countries that are experiencing some of the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And yet, we are not responsible for the current impacts that are already becoming so bad. We emit very little CO2. Very little CO2 emissions, but we are suffering some of the worst impacts. People are dying from floods, disasters like droughts that are drying up people's crops, people's food. Uganda heavily depends on agriculture for food and water. But again, agriculture depends on the natural systems. That means people are left hungry with nothing to eat or nothing to drink. We are here today to demand for justice from the leaders, because we are not responsible as people from Africa, and yet most times we are not being heard. Our voices are not being heard. Our voices are left behind. We are not on the front pages. Why is that so? I'm happy to be here to speak up for so many people back at home who are suffering, who have no hope for a future. Children are dropping out of school because schools have been washed away by floods. Schools have been destroyed, and we do not see the climate finance that was promised to be given to the people that have already been affected by the climate crisis. How long is this going to happen? Children do not have a hope for school. Girls are dropping out of school, and in the end, they have to be given away for marriage in exchange for bride price. Why do we have to go through this? How long shall we do this? How long shall we see this happening? We are here to tell the leaders today that for us in Africa and the Global South, the present is already catastrophic for us. We cannot wait for more 5 years or 10 years. We want justice right now. We want you to start by uprooting the systems that are already destroying our planet. Uproot the systems. Stop investing in any new fossil fuel projects. You need to stop now, because if you continue this, we will not be able to achieve the 1.5 degrees target. We want you to stop. We want you to listen to us. Uproot the systems that have already destroyed our planet and do the right thing. Put the people and the planet above the profit, because money will be useless on the dead planet. We cannot eat money. Thank you very much.
Up next, we have someone from our second one from the UK, is Mikaela Loach from the Stop Campbell campaign, and she's also one of the young people taking the UK government to court on climate change. Woo!
Oh wow, there's a lot of people. Last week, my heart was broken by the people inside that COP building, by the world leaders who steal our sacred words and use them to defend and uphold the oppressive systems of capitalism and white supremacy, who tell us the action needed to prevent sea level rise engulfing my ancestral home in Jamaica is impossible or not practical. In this heartbreak, fear and despair, I felt weak, but I will allow myself the space for my heart to break, so that the gold of community can be poured into those cracks and make it stronger. Make it bigger, because every time my heart breaks, it is made stronger. The antidote to despair is not to run away or ignore the realities of the societal violence around us. It is not to ignore the violence of our siblings on the front lines who experience at the hands of the neo-colonial fossil fuel companies. It is not to ignore the hypocrisy of the UK government, the hosts of this conference, who prop up these violent fossil fuel companies with £4 billion of our public money in subsidies. This same government who are trying to approve the Cambo oil field and 39 other oil and gas projects at a time when the IEA and the IPCC have said that we can have no new investment in oil and gas if we want a livable future. This is worse than hypocrisy. It is violence. In the face of this violence and despair, we cannot give up. We cannot be overwhelmed. We must act. These are last resort times. So do whatever you can and be audacious about how incredible the future we can create can be. We have to believe that we can achieve it. We must demand an end to capitalism. We must demand an end to white supremacy. We must demand black liberation. We must abolish prisons and the police. We must demand total liberation for all of us, because that is climate justice. Our demands cannot be toned down or palatable. They should worry, disrupt, and challenge the status quo. They should be transformational, because what other choice do we have? To sit by and let this happen? We must use all the tools we have. We must do all that we can, because change is not passive. As Rebecca Solnit says, hope comes from action. It's not a lottery ticket that we sit on the sofa hoping that we'll be lucky. It's an axe we use to break down doors with in an emergency. We are that axe. We will break down those doors together, and we must. This goes beyond these 2 weeks in Glasgow. We must keep up the momentum. 3 weeks from now, on the 8th of December, alongside Karen Van Sweden and Jeremy Cox, I will be taking the UK government to court over the North Sea oil and gas subsidies I mentioned before. We will hold them accountable. And with the support from all of you here for the Pay to Pollute campaign, we will end public payments for big polluters. We will win because the power is with the people, the power is with all of us. Thank you.
It is so important that we hold our leaders accountable to this crisis, especially the UK government, which is historically one of the biggest emitters. Up next, from Youth for Climate Argentina, we have Nina.
Hi everyone, I'm Nina Sosnitsky from Jóvenes por el Clima Argentina, Youth for Climate. I'm from Tucumán, a province in the north of my country, which is the poorest in the northwest, with a 46.2% poverty rate. In Tucumán, 30,000 families don't have access to drinking water, and in Argentina, 3.5 million people have no access to safe and drinkable water either. Last year, we saw news everywhere that water began to be listed on the Wall Street market. We are talking about the most basic human right of all. Water cannot be a commercial privilege. The members of an original community in Salta, north of Tucumán, have to walk several kilometers to find drinking water. On top of that, the only containers to carry water that they have access to are empty glyphosate shards that the producers of a soybean monoculture, which is almost on their territory, threw onto the side of their homes. Argentina is the country that applies the most agrotoxins per capita, ensuring the expansion of the agricultural frontier and damaging ecosystems. In addition to this, last year approximately 1.5 million hectares were burned. I have no doubt that every fire is political and that droughts, which are becoming and will be more frequent, are also political. We could endlessly continue mentioning concrete data and examples of subjugation on most vulnerable sectors. We could write volumes about it. There is a common denominator that I cannot fail to mention. These injustices arise from an extractive and withering production system, and they are replicated not only in Tucumán, but also in Argentina, in Latin America, and throughout the global south. The current model of an environmental depredation responds to the logic of a globalized capitalist economic model and to the demands of a world market. A system that is based on commodification of nature, a system designed for a few at the expense of a majority, that deepens social gaps and consolidates the consequences of the climate crisis. This model is the result of the imposition of a project of planned misery by the imperialist powers on the north on the people of the south. The climate crisis affects us all, but the crucial point is to understand that it does not affect us all in the same way. The global north is responsible for the debt in human and ecological terms suffered by the global south. It is no coincidence that in the regions where extractive mega projects are deployed the most, there is more poverty and hunger than in the countries the people responsible for these mega projects come from. Enough is enough. It's time for those who see our land as an open door to exploit natural resources to begin rethinking what the meaning of the concept development really is. No, it's not fair what we are going through as humanity. However, here we are, striking in Glasgow as leaders decide what's better or worse for our future. I know, guys, I know we are sick. We are sick of the blah, blah, blah. It saddens me to see the ineffectiveness, the lack of action, the ignorance, the disinterest, the denial, and the procrastination. But look around us. It isn't incredible? I'm excited to be standing here with you, thinking that the same collective activist action I developed in my country, each one of you develops in your own homelands. Come on, despair is not an option. Let's not lower our arms. The way is definitely collective, and the revolution will be always in the streets. Remember, if the present is one of struggle, the future is forever us. Si el presente es lucha, el futuro es nuestro. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nina. Up next, from the Papua New Guinea, we have Rekia. Woo!
Good afternoon, Glasgow. Can I see the fist up? There you go. My name is Rakiab. I'm the spokesperson of Free West Papua campaign. And I stand here in full solidarity on behalf of the indigenous peoples of West Papua. West Papua is the western half of the island of New Guinea, world's largest tropical island, described as one of the most frontline areas with the most unique land and marine biodiversity. This is my climate change story, and of that of my people. As political refugee from West Papua after the Indonesian military assassinated my father 4 months before I was born, me and my family had to flee to the Netherlands, where I grew up as Dutch citizen and joined the Dutch army because I thought that is the way to protect human rights, peace and justice. But I found out something else, that behind this militarism there's a huge political game. And that has transformed me to the freedom fighter I become today, an indigenous climate change activist. Imagine that your father was murdered just because he was making music about the pristine land, about the desire towards freedom, about upholding your culture, and that he was murdered about that. Imagine that 1/3 of all this audience was murdered the last 60 years, which is happening in West Papua, estimated by NGOs. 500,000 indigenous West Papuans. Once the home of the indigenous West Papuans, New Guinea Island has become a colonized land by Indonesia today, having world's largest gold mine owned by a U.S. mining corporation. BP with having one of the largest LNG gas projects, and palm oil companies destroying our ancient lands. World's third largest lung threatened with extinction of how the people. If I reflect you, our current status, 4.6 billion years of life, to just 10 years to prevent irreversible destruction of Earth's ecosystems. What does innovation and development mean? So this is what climate justice is about. And if I may reflect one of the outcomes of the UN IPCC that states that just 5% of world's populations exist of indigenous communities, have preserved more than 80% of world's remaining biodiversity. They are the most important stakeholders who've been ignored at COP26. Let me underline that. And if I may show you one other number, that 96% of all deforestations due to coal, mining, fossil fuel, cattle, happens on the same indigenous lands such as the Amazon, West Papua and other parts of the global south. So the climate crisis happens on the indigenous lands and is still happening there. But we have a way out. But we are not climate victims. We became climate leaders. Can I see fists up? We are the protectors of world's ecosystems. And yesterday, under the leadership of the provincial government, an indigenous-led government awaiting by His Excellency President Wendam, we have launched a green state vision. Go visit it, www.greenstatevision.info. We are taking the lead. We know how to manage pristine land. We know how to protect the world's third largest rainforest and preserve the world's largest tropical island. And we are taking the lead, kicking out these polluters and offering the world a solution. Thank you very much, and build alliances. Just a small invitation for upcoming Sunday. Please do join the March Against Climate Colonialism on Sunday, meeting outside Blard Place on Argyle Street at 1:20 + 1. Thank you very much, and keep up the momentum!
That was absolutely incredible. We have to stand with our land defenders, especially in the Pacific, where they're facing effects right now and have been facing them for decades now. This is not a future problem anymore. Up next, I'd like to welcome two speakers from a Fridays for Future working group who work with activists in risk zones where it's dangerous and even life-threatening to be an activist. So I'd like to welcome Lena and Ali.
We are Ali and Lena from the Fridays for Future Activists and Risk Zone Task Force, which has and is supporting activists at risk since early 2019. In the past few weeks, we have been working with all of our capacities to evacuate climate activists from Afghanistan. Afghanistan, a country that has been at war for more than 40 years. Generations have fought and sacrificed a lot for the end of the war and have worked hard with care to rebuild their homeland, to make a sustainable future for Afghanistan possible. Once activists in Afghanistan called for help, we started our operations and managed to evacuate around 50 people so far. 3 of those young people are Camila, Ahmad, and Madina.
Camila's life has been in danger because she is a young woman, bravely fighting for climate justice. She has now been evacuated to Pakistan. After the Taliban took over, she has received many death threats. But let us quote her here. So far, we have worked together to protect the environment. If you really work for the environment to save people, we work with you. And now we ask you to cooperate for a visa in a country for a better life and future. Now I live in Pakistan in unknown circumstances, alone and away from my family. I am a girl. I am vulnerable even in Pakistan. I'm very worried and anxious, and my family is worried about me. I do not sleep well at night until the morning. My tears flow. My heart is full of despair. Maybe you understand what such a life is like? If it's difficult to understand, just spend one night in a place where your future is unknown, away from family or friends. Then you will know about me. So with tears in my eyes and my heart in despair and in a state of distress, I ask you to help me as soon as possible. I am a person. Can you bring me to a safe country? Doesn't your heart burn for me? Thank you for listening to the story of a young, lonely, and unfortunate girl.
Ahmad. Ahmad has been actively advocating for children's rights in Afghanistan and started Fridays for Future in Afghanistan. And because of that, he has received many threats from the Taliban. Ahmad says, I lived in Kabul all my life, born in the province of Panjshir. We had bittersweet days in Kabul, good memories of marches and gathering with friends, and bitter memories of losing our best friends to war and terror. But we had a hope to live our plans and goals, big and small. When we used to march, it was hard and worrying that something bad would happen to all of us. We had future strategies and plans. We were planning the future of Fridays for Future Afghanistan. But when the Taliban came, the government collapsed once and for all. We had to forget our plans, our dreams, our works, our goals. Our only struggle became our survival and how to get out of Afghanistan. We have thousands of memories and we have had our future planned. We are now alienated from them at our homeland. Could you imagine this for a moment? When we were being evacuated, we felt like waiting at the end of the world. And we accepted all the danger and our fate. And now we're worried and anxious for our families and friends. We are aware of the terrible and ugly events there at every moment.
Madina has been advocating for climate justice for several years now. She now lives safely in Berlin and is trying to pursue her dreams. She's saying, "I always wanted to be strong like a man because of my childhood. I grew up like a man because this country does not value girls and women. Doing workshops for women and children was not easy for me. I am a woman living in a country that has had its people burning and dying due to the politics of another country. But recently the country had progressed. Afghanistan is in need of environmental action because of the bad consequences of climate change, such as water scarcity. As a young environmental activist, I urge the whole world to pay attention because Afghanistan will be a dangerous country in the future. I was expelled by the Taliban by force, and there was no hope for me to continue my education. Members of Fridays for Future, like myself, wish for a day where there is no war in the world and people do not burn because of the policies of other countries."
We are worried about Camila, Ahmad and Madina's families, as well as other people who have been evacuated to Pakistan. There is a possibility that if we remain unsuccessful in finding a country for them where they can be resettled, that the Pakistani government would deport them back to Afghanistan.
And now we are here because we need your support. We need you all to help us raise funds to keep them safe and to evacuate more people. We need you to ask your governments to start humanitarian programs for activists and other people who are on the Taliban's wanted list. We need to speak about this everywhere, as long as Camila, Ahmad, Madina and the rest cannot be here. Imagine these would be European climate activists. No environmental organization would forget about them so quickly. FFF Afghanistan has no representation at this conference, neither at this climate strike. Let us fight together to leave no one behind.
Leave no one behind!
We were super excited to platform those voices, especially because in Glasgow we have a history of supporting the refugees, especially, some of you will remember, on Kinmure Street when we prevented a family being deported. Say it loud and say it clear. Refugees are welcome here. Say it clear. Refugees are welcome here. Woo! Okay, up next we have Frieza Stewart, who is a researcher and something else that I forgot, activist. He researches at Strathclyde Uni, just up the road. So, Frieza.
What a trip, man, what a trip. Can I first say that it's an absolute privilege to be here with the speakers that are on the bill today. I come from a working class community here in Scotland. The kind of community that they say cannot care about the climate crisis. They tell us that climate is the concern of the lovely middle classes and angry young people like you. They insist that working class people couldn't possibly care about the planet that they live on or the other people who live here. But this could not be further from the truth, because there are people everywhere, trust me, from the suburbs to the schemes, who are worried and raging about the climate crisis. People everywhere who are outraged at the loss and damage and destruction being caused by our leaders' lack of action. People everywhere who call bullshit on governments who say that they cannot afford to end poverty or vaccine apartheid or climate chaos while funneling billions into fossil fuels everywhere. People everywhere who see through the hypocrisy of governments claiming to be climate leaders on one hand and then opening new oil fields and coal mines with the other. People everywhere who know that climate change has already devastated millions of most affected people around the world, and who know that, like everything, it is those with the least means and the least responsibility who will be hit the hardest and forced to clean up the mess. The temperature is rising. From the suburbs to the schemes, I promise you that. They say around here that climate's only a concern for folk who don't have to worry about the real issues of poverty and inequality every day. But these are not separate issues, because the climate crisis is driven by exactly the same things that drive poverty and inequalities the world over, and it makes those problems worse. It is driven by the same governments and bosses who think that their profit and growth is worth more than lives and livelihoods and a livable planet. By the same broken economic system that demands the exploitation of marginalised people and working class people everywhere, that exploits the planet itself for the sake of personal financial gain, and a crisis that hits those already fighting for equity and dignity and respect, especially those women and people of colour in the global south, while those with most power and responsibility never have to feel a thing. This is not just a crisis of climate or emissions. This is a crisis of justice, of inequality, of poverty, of racism, of classism, of workers' rights and women's rights in every intersection in between, in every single corner of the planet. And this is why we say that climate justice is social justice, and why we bring these struggles together, because these are not separate struggles. Because building a greener and fairer world that supports communities and people and nature everywhere means uprooting the same broken system together. They say that working class people know nothing and care less about climate justice. But there is one thing that we do know for certain, that working class and marginalised people know better than anywhere in the world. We know that there is power in solidarity. We know that there is strength in uniting our struggles to force real change. We know that we all can have justice, but only if we are willing to stand together and demand it. So to everyone here today, or watching at home, from the suburbs to the schemes, from the north to the south, I say this: this is our fight. From frontline activists to frontline workers, this is our fight. From George Square to Georgetown, Kilmarnock to Kampala, this is our fight. From Dundee to Dakar, Aberdeen to the Amazon, this is our fight, because climate justice is social justice, because together we are powerful, and because together we can demand a safer present and a fairer, greener future that all of us deserve. Thank you very much.